Hello and welcome to the Sky Sports Cricket Podcast, and we're looking at what was a sensational test match at the Sydney Cricket Ground. A fabulous game all round, but a dramatic final day and particularly final hour. As ever, here in the UK, I'm joined by Rob Key, Nasser Hussain, but our man on the ground at the Sydney Cricket Ground today was Michael Atherton. Just talk us through that last hour, Ath. What was it like being at the ground?
Well, it was one of those hours that only Test cricket can give you, really. It was building to it, wasn't it, throughout the day. Brave, stoic resistance from England throughout the afternoon. A fantastic innings, I thought, from Zach Crawley at the start of the day. But then, just as the second new ball came, Cummins summoned some last reserves of energy and inspiration, got rid of Buttler and Wood. And I thought then that England were doomed, actually. I thought that image of Wood on his hands and knees was going to be the defining image of the game and almost the series, really. And then it led to, 17 overs, an hour, just over an hour of great drama. There were about 12,000 in the ground, making a serious amount of noise, clouds rolling in, floodlights on. Obviously, at the end, the umpires told Cummins he couldn't bowl his quicker bowlers, which reminded me, actually, of the last Ashes draw at this ground, which was 94-5 when I captained, and exactly the same thing happened. We had Australia 7 down and I couldn't bowl Devon Malcolm at the end of the game. So it was always going to be the case, wasn't it? Jimmy Anderson walking out to bat. I mean, his destiny in life is to keep walking out to bat. About 2 or 3 overs to go, but at least there wasn't the quick bowlers sending him round his lug holes for a change. And in the end, he batted it out quite calmly, but it was a great last hour. Just a little bit of drizzle started to fall at the end, and it was interesting to see Steve Smith not tear off to the pavilion when he was batting. But great drama, and England were on the wrong end of the game, but they showed great character and resilience this afternoon. Gave their all, which is all you can ask for.
Nasser, high drama, wasn't it? I mean, shades of, Auckland, Cardiff, that game against Sri Lanka at Headingley. I mean, Test cricket going right down to the wire is not much better.
Yeah, I was going to say all it needed was Jimmy getting out to Steve Smith at the end there and Nath going over and interviewing him as he did on the stage at Headingley and reducing him to tears. Test cricket is fabulous. I mean, try and explain that, 5 days, a draw, with a batter in Steve Smith bowling to 2 bowlers, trying to keep him out. Anderson and Broad, the veterans of Test cricket, men round the bat, everyone apart from the square leg umpire was round the bat. It was drama. It was brilliant. It was a great Test match. Another good Test match pitch. It didn't spin as much as the Sydney Cricket Ground usually does. There was a bit more grass on it, but it was very watchable right from start to finish. And I agree completely with what Michael has said there. Great fight and character. Put it into context. Yes, it's a draw. Yes, they're hanging in, but half their coaches are, in Melbourne recovering from COVID or just getting to Sydney. They've got a lad driving from Queensland to Sydney to try and play in the next game. They got 3 or 4 of their team with injuries, Stokes and Buttler and Bairstow gutsing it out. So I thought with everything that's gone on in this tour, 3-zip down, to show such fight and such character was excellent from England. Just what they needed, really. So much difficulty on the tour. That will lift spirits in the dressing room.
Yeah, Keezy, what will that do for the dressing room?
Yeah, I always find it fascinating when a team does draw a game and how they react. And I quite like the fact they'll obviously be absolutely elated that they've sort of put off the 5-0, the whitewash, all of that type of stuff. I quite enjoyed the way that Jimmy, the worst ball you could ever get, probably, or bowl, but the best one you could get as a batsman, the last ball when you need to survive. And I love Jimmy's reaction where he just he probably thought I could smash this anywhere and then just went like and blocked.
Was it Shannon Gabriel?
Over.
Shannon Gabriel who played that shot in Bridgetown.
Why did he do that? I want to get in trouble for that, but anyway. I thought it was great entertainment as much as anything else. I think more than anything, I'm so pleased for Johnny Bairstow, not just because he got those runs, but in the manner in which he did it, the way that Stokes played, the intent that I always, go on about. I thought, and I know not everyone can do that and all that type of stuff, but I thought the manner in which Johnny went out and played then sort of set a bit of a marker and almost sort of freed up other players as well, like Zach Crawley. So I thought the manner in which some of those guys got their runs was so important. I said on Sky Sports News the other day, for once, someone threw a punch at a great bowling attack. And this is Cummins. I thought he was outstanding. But for once, someone actually stood up and just said, come on then, I'm coming at you a bit. And that was great to see.
We'll come back to that intent, because I'd like to pick your brains on something Ricky Ponting was saying on Channel 7 in Australia in a minute. But Nas, from Joe Root's captaincy point of view, what will that do for him? How will he be feeling, having been 3-0 down, staring down the barrel of 5-0, etc.?
I think he'll be proud of his team, to be honest. I think, you're judged on how the dressing room react to your captaincy. And you asked me, I think at the end of the last game, do you feel you've lost the dressing room? And it will show that he hasn't lost the dressing room. He's shown that there's a dressing room there that's willing to fight for him. And they've said that all the way throughout. Ben Stokes backed him up, didn't he, in the game, in the press conference before the game, how he feels that, it's up to Joe. It's in Joe Root's hands as to what he wants to do with the captaincy. So that will lift him, 4-0 down, going to Hobart with all the injuries and everything going on. That would have been one heck of a journey. It just means the last week or 10 days of the trip, they can travel to Hobart. We've all done those little journeys in Australia, I tell you, where you turn up at the airport and everyone's abusing you and laughing at you and calling the whitewash. It just means you can jump on that flight to Hobart with a bit more of a smile on your face, not quite so embarrassed you're 4-zip down. Who knows at the end? Who knows at the end of this tour? Root has to make a decision on his captaincy, or Giles has to make a decision on Root's captaincy at the end of this tour. But that just gives him a bit of breathing space and just a chance to go and enjoy Hobart and put in a performance there.
We'll obviously come back to England, but I'd like to touch, Ath, on Australia and a couple of individual performances. Boland's had a fantastic start to his Test career, and Usman Khawaja was the man of the match. 2 fantastic, breathtaking hundreds.
Absolutely. I think I'm right in saying that Scott Boland's rib injury was quite serious, that his kind of cartilage was removed from his rib or something. So he was bowling with severe pain today and some injections. And I mean, he looks as though he'd be an excellent signing for a county, actually.
Yeah, does he ever?
Strong bowler,
Not half.
hits the seam, very skillful and exceptionally accurate. I thought the bit of cricket, actually, when he got Joe Root out was excellent today, because he came on mid-afternoon with a ball that was just reversing a fraction. And he kind of started with very straight fields and he bowled absolutely at the knee roll and at the stumps. And then 2 overs later, Cummins said, let's go to an off stump line, extra slip, extra man on the offside. And he got Root out nicking. So he knows exactly what he's doing. He's had a tremendous start to his Test career. And of course, Usman Khawaja, a fabulous pair of hundreds, really. Very attractive player to watch. Obviously, he knows his game inside out. He's played 45 Test matches and had a lot of success anyway. But it's hard to see how they'll leave him out now. And he probably will open, I would have thought, in the next Test alongside Warner, and Travis Head will come in to the middle order. So he looks as though he's cemented his place, and they go to Pakistan next, which is where he was born. He obviously came to Australia many years ago, has been there a long time, but he's got links there, and that will be an emotional return for him, I'm sure.
Time was lost, Nas, out of the game because of weather, but Australia, as Michael was alluding to there, Steve Smith seemed quite keen to get off the ground quite quickly. Did that stuff them in the end? Did they lose a little bit of time that they needed at the end to pry out the last pair? Yeah,
I think so. There was a bit of talk that the 4th evening, were they batting on too long? And Cummins sort of explained his thinking today after the game that it wasn't a pitch that was deteriorating. You know, sometimes in the last evening, Sydney is spinning. Lyon hasn't got a great record at the SCG, you know, on his home ground there. I thought at times, especially in the first innings, he didn't bowl particularly well. But Rob's point's a good one with England going after him. It put him on the back foot and put him under a bit of pressure. So I'd be interested to hear from Ath. What was the thinking out there? Did the Aussie press and the Aussies think that they batted on too long when you have a side 9 down. I mean, if it had been Root making that decision, we'd have been slamming Root as we did Strauss in the Caribbean all those years ago. Did they think they batted on too long last night or the night before?
At lunchtime, I was wondering about what they were aiming to do. And I thought they'd bat for another 45 overs after lunch, and give England an hour in the evening at about 380, which is where they eventually got to. The only thing was that it was just a bit messy at the end when Cameron Green got out and then Alex Carey came in for one ball and then they declared. But if it was conservative, it was only marginally so, I think. The pitch was flattening, I thought, not completely similar to last year, they say, when India batted 133 overs. They said that was a much deader pitch. But I thought some of the spite and life had gone out of it a bit last evening. When England's openers came out to bat, I kind of feared the worst. And actually, there wasn't much there. And all the kind of hitting of the batsman's gloves, really, there wasn't that much there of it on day 5 compared to earlier in the game. So it's an interesting one, whether if the captains had their time again, whether they'd look to bowl first there, I guess. But anyway, I don't think it was a particularly misjudged declaration. Obviously, a lot of time lost in the game. Another 7 overs lost on the final day, which proved to be quite important. That little rain shower around lunchtime proved to be quite important. And the bad light that prevented him bowling his quicker bowlers at the end.
Actually, I texted Zach after that evening, after the 4th evening, when he got through, him and Hamid. And you said, like you do, say, "Oh, well done, look good there." And he sort of said, "Yeah, it's a better pitch now." And you said when I spoke to him about Melbourne, he said, "That ball, every ball did something. That was so hard." And he's not the type of lad that sort of exaggerate stuff like that, and he was he said, "No, this is a good pitch to bat." He was looking forward to today, I think, because he felt probably this was the best time to bat he's had so far in the series.
He shaped up beautifully today. Let's talk more general, Keezy, about the intent that you mentioned earlier, because you sent through around the WhatsApp group something that Ricky Ponting had done for Channel 7. Give us the gist of what Punter was saying.
Yeah, I sent that to Zach as well, actually, because it's just the way I was obviously nowhere near as good as Ponty. That doesn't need to be said, but I love the way that he thinks about the game and thinks about batting. And what he basically said, he said that against a good bowling attack, against good bowlers, you have to have the ability to put pressure back on the bowler. You can't just hang in there. And he quite rates Zach because he looks like he's got the ability to do that. And that's been a little bit, I suppose, the dilemma that England have had over the last year or so, in my opinion. You look at, and it's about the players they pick almost. Can a Sibley, Burns, Hamid, do they have that ability? Do they have the talent to be able to put good bowlers like Cummins under pressure? And then you have other people that think that actually you've just got to get in and you've got to survive, and you've got to wait and you've got to wait. But for Zach Crawley in particular, that Ponting way is how he plays better. That might not work for other people. In my opinion, that's how you look to play. I mean, these guys played a lot more than me. What do you think?
I just think there shouldn't be just one way, should there? I mean, Michael Atherton will probably be remembered as a fairly defensive opening batsman, but Ath was always looking to score. If you bowled a bad ball to Ath, he would put it away. It can't just be one way or t'other. It is the basics of batting. They bowl you a good ball, you keep it out, and you have to have that mindset. I think that's what's changed. And it's something that you've always said about looking to leave and being defensive. It's something that Graham Gooch used to say. When you're looking to attack first and then defend, I think you're in a better position technically, mentally, to put away the bad ball. And I think that's what Zach Crawley does. Whereas with Sibley, Burns, Hamid, they're looking to defend, and occasionally they miss out on the balls they can score off. So England end up going nowhere, and the quality of bowling at the moment, fast bowling in Test match cricket in the last couple of years have increased. And you could argue, even in England, you're not really going to see off that new ball, because after 30 overs, it's still doing a bit, and England are still going nowhere, and Root is still in early. So it was great to see. I mean, for me, and I know, Rob, you're on here and we were WhatsApping each other at 1 a.m. last night or whatever, but watching Zach Crawley bat last night was one of the highlights for me after what we've seen in the last couple of years and the way we've plodded along with our openers and England have done. to watch him go after Cummins and Boland and Stark and put them under pressure, look technically sound. His timing off the bat was exquisite. He got in such good positions. And he talked it up before the game. I love the way he talked it up, a little bit like Stuart Broad occasionally does. If you talk that talk, I'm going to go out there and get runs. Lyon was into him because he had said that. And he went out and walked the walk, really. That was a lovely. He'll be disappointed he didn't get 100. But for a lot of England fans that stayed up night after night watching us plod to 20 for 3, it would have been a great, great bonus watching that Crawley innings.
How do you see it, Ath?
Well, similarly to what I said last time, I think that if I compare Crawley and Hamid, obviously two different players, but what I feel is that Crawley's got some presence at the crease, and it's not just. I mean, obviously he's quite a tall lad and an imposing, physically is imposing, but I felt, and we saw it today, that if the bowlers err, he's got some ammunition in his locker and he can put some pressure back on the bowlers. I thought he drove the ball nicely, and then when they pull their length back, he's got that ability to pull. I've always said that I don't believe you can get 200, as he and Rob did in Test cricket, without being able to play. That he's got a game for sure. I do think there are areas that he can tighten up. You know, opening the batting in Test cricket is a tough old place to bat, and you will be examined, and particularly in England more so than in Australia, although the pitches here for this series have been quite bowler friendly by Australian standards, but there's been very little movement in the air. Not even, you know, Stark and Anderson have really moved the kookaburra in the air here. So, you know, you will get tested from a technical point of view more so. So I think there are areas he can tighten up. You see a lot of his top half, you see a lot of the right side, and that means sometimes that the ball comes, the bat comes across the ball. But so that the areas that he can work on there and tighten up. But fundamentally, I feel that if I was a bowler, I'd be more concerned bowling at Crawley than Hamid, for example, because if I get it wrong, I'm going to get punished. So I you know, he's got to get runs. He obviously his returns have been thin, but he's got the place at the moment. It's his place. He's going to get the next game at Hobart, and if he continues to do well, he'll get a run in the side. And I think it will be nice to see that from an England perspective, because you feel that they're not just going to be standing still at the top of the order. I also feel that about Burns, actually. Although he's an unusual player, I don't feel that he's just a dogged sticker. I think actually he can flow a bit when he's batting as well, even though he's slightly unusual in his style. I can't see that Hamid is going to play the next game in Hobart. I thought that they dropped Rory Burns one match too soon, and I suspect that Crawley and Burns will probably open together in that final test.
How do you see that, Rob? Would you give Hasib Hamid another go, or would you go to Burns, who hasn't played for a while? I mean, precious little time in the middle, none at all.
Yeah, I always feel I've got to sort of backtrack there, because you know, I was one that Burns, you know, where's the upside to Burns? You know, he's played 30 Test matches, averaging 30, but then Hamid, again, it's like, well, the upside for him, you know, what's his best cricket? You know, when I look, you know, and people talk about Alistair Cook, how he used to occupy the crease. Cook would cut and pull you everywhere. He had his shots. You know, the same with Strauss, whoever these guys are, they all have their place where they can put bowlers under pressure. I don't think Hamid has that. Like, I didn't think that Sibley had that. I watched Sibley bat for a long time. Where's his area? I know he sort of walks across and flicks occasionally, but where, if the bowler misses his mark, where does he punish them? You're not sure he does. And I think the same with Hamid. And against this type of bowling, the upside's not good enough. It's not when he's struggling like he is now. It's like, well, what's his best cricket? What's he going to do with that? And I'm not sure that that's good enough at the moment. So I'd have to backtrack, and I would go to Burns. But then there'd be a caveat on that when they get to the West Indies and in the next summer, you know, Burns better get some runs, as Zach and these people, because then you're starting to look at, well, who is it that can actually take this batting forward? Because after an Ashes series, it's always the way where they start again, where they're looking to rebuild and looking to see who they back. But for this game or next game, I'd change Hamid for Burns.
What about Bairstow's performance in this test, Nass? Impressed?
Very, very. On the back of not playing much cricket, coming in last game and then going out in such a difficult position as well. 30 odd for 4. England were done and dusted. You could think with all the rain around, the follow-on may have been imposed. You never know, or at least it would have bought them, Australia, so much more time. Lose a couple there, and I know Wood batted well and hit some sixes or whatever, but Wood at 8, a long tail for England. That partnership with Stokes was so vital. He seems to bat really well with Stokes. They feed off each other really well. Agree with Rob. For the first time, there was a counter punch from England. A little bit to do with Australia, really. Australia haven't let England counter punch. They've been so good. But Johnny Bairstow took it to them. I would say I always felt, and I know Ath feels the same way, I think he was a little bit hard done by. When he had the gloves and he was batting, and yes, his batting diminishing returns with the bat, but he was doing a pretty decent job as a batter-keeper. And I fully understand why they went for Buttler, because the upside, Rob talks about upside of every individual, the upside of if Jos Buttler could work out red ball cricket, and I'm talking even county, he hadn't scored that many runs in red ball cricket, there was a huge upside for Buttler. And imagine if Bairstow had kept and had stopped scoring runs, what would everyone have been saying after every white ball game? Why isn't Buttler doing it? Buttler could do this in test match cricket. So they've tried Buttler. It hasn't worked. There's been a couple of games where he's batted really well. So I thought it was a bit harsh on Bairstow to take the gloves. And he's always better. We know, Johnny, that he's always better when he's got a point to prove. I think he's always like that. And I think in this game, what we've needed is that feistiness. You look at the people that have done well in this game, especially in that first innings. Broad, point to prove. Bairstow, Stokes carrying that injury. He's a real fighter, Ben Stokes. Mark Wood, the way Mark Wood has been throughout this tour has been unbelievably good, the character he's shown. So I think out of everything, it's those people with character in this side really stood up in that first innings, and Bairstow is one of them.
What an emotional celebration when he got to 3 figures, Ath, in that first innings.
Absolutely. I think I'm right in saying that the start of this game was an anniversary of his dad's death, and every time he gets a test match 100, he looks to the heavens and must be thinking that way. Of course, he's not scored a test match 100 for 3 years. He's been a little bit in and out of the side, up and down the order, not settled as he had been in that wicket-keeping number 7 position. And great to see there was a player who cares about his career, cares about his performance, puts pride in his performance. And that was a statement from a cricketer who is saying, my test match career is not yet done. And of course, he batted for, I think it was 154 minutes today, 2.5 hours, or a little bit more, with a very sore thumb. Don't think it's fractured or broken, but he was clearly in some discomfort. And was in there again in the engine room trying to get England to a draw. So a terrific match for him. And again, a little bit like Zach Crawley, he's done enough to keep his place in the side. And at the moment, if you look at that England team, you can't say that there are too many certainties of selection. So if you're in that team at the moment, if you've got one of the places, you're saying, I am going to do enough to keep myself in this side for the next game or two. And he's certainly done that.
Rob Key, who keeps in the first game in the Caribbean?
This is what
we haven't got to Hobart yet. Don't worry about that.
Because Hobart, there are certain people you can't pick in Hobart, for like example, Ben Folkes or whatever. So I'm going to throw it forward when everyone's available. Who are you picking, Keezy, for the first game in the Caribbean?
Right, Zoom etiquette is you put your hand up when you want to speak.
Now you're just buying yourself some time to think of some names. My
dodgy finger up to say to Wardy, because I was going to say to you guys actually that my point with Bairstow, has always been really that I always thought that he was one of our best batsmen, and I know he hasn't shown that. And this is the interesting thing, I think, because there'll be people now that say, well, Bairstow, he shouldn't have had the gloves taken off him, and they're entitled to that opinion. So now let's give him the gloves back and put him to number 7 and bring in a batsman who's averaged less than 30 for however long. So what would I do? I would actually keep him as the batsman, because I think he is one of our better batsmen, and now he's got confidence. It's been a long road for him to get there, and it's been faults on every side on that. So I would have him. And then when you get into the West Indies, then it's a toss-up between, well, Billings is going to play in Hobart. Now, if he gets run,
is he? Definitely.
I think well, from what I'm reading in the press, from what it looks like and what I've seen, it looks like Billings is almost a certainty to come in, because Bairstow's hand is not good enough to keep. Whether he's going to be good enough to play is another thing.
Pope kept well when he was substituting, and he was on the tour originally to play.
Has Key given us a name for the Caribbean yet?
I'm getting round to that now.
Waffle.
I am not going to.
This is longer than Sam Billings' journey to Sydney. Come on, Key.
Right. I'm going to play Billings at Hobart, and then, I'm going to have a thing, and I'm going to go either. I'm not sure. I go Folkes, Butler, or Billings.
Butler's out forever. He's a bad injury by the sound of it.
Look, I'm more than happy. I've got no issue. Josh Butler hasn't done enough to warrant his place in the side as a batsman keeper at the moment. I've got no issue with that. But who replaces him, I can't tell you. If Sam Billings does well, then he comes in. If Folkes does, then if it's not him, then Folkes does it. The only thing I'm not doing is making Bairstow the keeper. He can be the batsman. If you can edit that, Reaver, producer, just that answer, that would be much better.
No, we're going to keep the waffle. We're going to keep the waffle. It was TV gold. He had an interesting trip down, though, from the Gold Coast, Sam Billings.
Well, he did. He was obviously told he had to drive. He couldn't fly because of COVID. That's been a situation for a few of the players here. So Travis Head had to drive, I think, from Adelaide to Melbourne or wherever he went to after that. And it's a long drive. I don't know how many hours it is from Queensland to here, but it's a hell of a drive. So he tweeted, one of his tweets was, Australia's a big country. Well, and then he rang into the ABC here when Stephen Finn has been doing radio here, and very well, I understand. And there was a call in for Finney, and Sam Billings rang in from the middle of the outback somewhere. I don't know where he was. And in fact, was asked where he was, and he said, I've no idea. And then he said, of course, it would be classic Bilbo for me to drive for 75 hours and then carry the drinks in Hobart, which he may well do yet. Who knows? But clearly they're in a bit of a bind with Josh Butler, who'll be returning home on Monday. It sounds like a bad fracture that he has sustained. So, what did he bat today? 10 overs, I think. Quite a good effort. Must have been hurting. I don't know whether he had a ring block injection. But 10 overs that took quite a bit of time out of the game.
Who are you keeping with then, Nas, in Hobart for England? Let's say Johnny Bairstow can keep. He's available to keep, and his thumb's okay. You would think, would want to keep. He's always stated he wants to be the wicketkeeper batsman. Would you give him the gloves? Would you bring Sam Billings in? Would you go with Ollie Pope?
I would go for Johnny Bairstow. I disagree with Rob. Actually, I've always thought that Johnny Bairstow is a very good keeper batsman for England. Now, whether you feel he's coming, although this test match shows that he's not, or you'd think he's not, if he's coming towards the end of his test match career as a keeper batsman and you want to look to the future, then you have Ben Folkes. Ben Folkes is the best keeper in England. So you go down that route and you hope that Folkes' batting gets to the standard required for test match cricket, which it will do if you give him a long enough run. But for me personally, I've always felt that Johnny Bairstow is an excellent keeper batsman for England. So it always looks a little bit odd when you're playing 2 or 3 at times keeper batsmen. It's like just pick your keeper batsman and then pick your batter after that. So I'd bring Pope in to bat because he's a fantastic young prospect for the future. He comes in to bat, and I'd give the gloves to Johnny Bairstow again. Like I say, probably shouldn't have been taken off him.
Let's look ahead to the bowling and let's review what the bowlers did at the SCG. Broad had a point to prove, Keezy, and he walked the walk.
He did, yeah, as he often does, really. And you sort of go, don't you, with Broad? You sort of feel that he's coming right to the end and that he's going to retire, and you start hearing all the talk and he says, oh, I'm not sure, we'll have to wait and see. Then he gets fifer and he probably thinks he wants to play till he's 45, Broady, and get however many wickets. So I thought it was great to see it. And he's been unlucky as well. I thought, as we've said many a time, they got it wrong at Brisbane. But he's actually as well missed out on the two pitches that have done the most by an absolute mile. The two pitches that he would have killed to bowl on were Brisbane and Melbourne. And he's missed out on those and got 5 wickets here when he's probably undercooked by some way as well. And he got Warner again. That was another reason to pick him and how they didn't earlier on. So fair play to Stuart Broad. Whenever people write him off, he sort of does something extraordinary.
Mark Wood showed terrific heart and pace throughout this test.
Yeah, good effort from him. He's played all test matches bar the Adelaide test now, hasn't he? So consecutive test matches here, Melbourne and this one, and Brisbane. Hope he's fit for Hobart, although I suspect the way that Pat Cummins Yorker thudded into him. He flattened him on his hands and knees, and then he had to limp off. That looked like the kind of hit that might trouble him a bit. I don't know, but he's been terrific. I mean, you look at his figures. I don't know what he's averaging with the ball, 37 in this series or something. He's got 8 wickets. Lots of other bowlers have taken more, but I don't think you can just see this game through the lens of black and white statistics and figures. I think he's offered a lot more to England than that. England have looked a better attack when he's in it. Of the 8 wickets that he's got, he's had Labuschagne 3 times, he's had Smith once, and he's had Warner once. So 5 of the 8 have been, their best players, and their best players have looked jumpy when Wood has bowled. And he's kept his pace up, he's kept running in, even on the 4th evening when that declaration was approaching and Khawaja and Green were kind of pushing on. I think Root asked him to bowl a 5 over spell, and the speed gun was still 145 plus, and that was the end of a pretty dispiriting day. So he's shown a lot of character. I think, well, people in England love Mark Wood. I think Australians have taken to him here in the way that they took to Darren Gough, say, in our era. You can think of other cricketers, Beefy, before that, and loads of others, no doubt. But they like players who give it a go. And Mark Wood is one of those for sure.
Zoom etiquette. Nasser, you had your hand up. I think this is where Key's going to talk over you and ask you a question.
I can talk over Key. I'm not talking over Atherton, I'm afraid. So it just reminds me of the tweet that Ali Martin, the Guardian correspondent, sent when everyone was talking about Mark Wood. And he said just proof that the game of cricket is not just a spreadsheet and shouldn't be looked like that. And the game of cricket is about stats, because the side that gets more runs wins the game. But there is more to the game, and stats have come into the game so much more in the last 3 or 4, whether it be CricViz and all your analysts and everything. And if you look at, for example, Zach Crawley's stats, there was no reason for Zach Crawley to play in these last 2 test matches. He's averaging 10 last year, but there's a gut feel there's more to come from that lad. And if you look at Mark Wood's stats, you would say, well, what's all the fuss about with Mark Wood? But Mark Wood's probably, hasn't on this tour, but probably going to end up playing more on flatter pitches away from home than he would at home with the Duke's ball when Chris Wokes might play more than him. So I do think the likes of Wood are a reminder that it's not just about statistics, this game, which is an odd thing to say when it is purely runs and wickets. There has to be a gut feel and a potential and a little bit of feel for the game as well.
It looks like as well that Ben Stokes is, whether he's going to play is one thing, but it certainly looks like he's not going to be able to bowl. So then they've got the balance of the team problems again. And in the past, England have sort of fudged it a bit. Root's bowled, they've gone in with extra seamers. This is where Jack Leach has found himself just out the team. They have got the option here, I think, and this is what I would do. Obviously, we haven't seen the pitch, and I know it's a pink ball game, which England are brilliant at, albeit they don't win one. For me, I would actually go in with the 3 seamers and Jack Leach. However, we obviously have to see how those seamers pitch up, who's fit and who can go. What would you boys do?
Well, let's touch on Leach before we balance the side. I mean, Leach might play in Hobart, but what did you make out of his performance? He got overs under his belt and some encouraging wickets.
He did. He got 4 wickets in the second innings. But, slightly underwhelmed, really, by Jack Leach's bowling in this series. it's completely unfair to compare against a bowler who's got 400 Test match wickets. But I don't feel that either Leach has offered Root much control in the early stages of the game, nor that much threat. Although he picked up 4 wickets, Australia were pushing on well ahead of the game yesterday. So I don't know. It's a problem for England because there's no obvious solution, no obvious place to go. But his bowling has looked a bit flat to me in trajectory. Obviously, the field settings that were set here in the last couple of games were a hangover from what happened at the Gabba, where Australia took him down, and then both he and Root gave interviews saying, "Oh, well, they regretted the overly attacking fields," but then they set the field back and they're just getting milked for 3 or 4 runs and over. So it's a conundrum, really. England are not flush with alternatives. If you could pluck 3 or 4 spinners from the county game and to give you alternatives, then fair enough. But there don't seem to be that. So it's almost making do with what you've got. But to be honest, in this series, it's not really been much from Jack Leach.
Has there been much talk over there about what conditions might be like in Hobart? Now, obviously, we don't know about weather forecasts, etc. We haven't seen the pitch, but it's a pink ball test. But it can be exceptionally flat at the Bellerive Oval.
Well, everybody's saying it's just going to be bloody cold. They pushed back the start of the game to 3 o'clock. So it's going to finish at God knows what time. And as you know, Hobart can be a bit fresh. And I think it was who published on social media today some picture of the ground, which was underwater, some unbelievable thunderstorm that hit Bellerive today, and it was underwater. So who knows, really? As you say, it can be quite a flat pitch there, but one suspects that the nighttime, the lights, the pink ball, all that kind of thing will slightly move things towards the bowlers, but we shall wait and see.
Right, Nass, how do England balance the side? Because as Keezy quite rightly said, it doesn't look like Ben Stokes has got a hope of being able to offer any overs for Joe Root. He might not be able to play at all. You see him grimace like that, he's seriously got a problem. So how do they balance the side if he cannot bowl?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the first discussion. I don't think there's a price of him bowling, and there's a debate, really. I wrote before a ball was bowled in this series, make sure you look after Ben Stokes. He has not played cricket and bowled for a long, long time. So don't give him more than 10 overs a day and don't bowl him into the ground. And I was incredibly surprised that the role Ben Stokes has been given in this series, having not bowled in Test match cricket for 6 to 9 months, having played no cricket at all, to suddenly get that Neil Wagner, bang it in. I've not bowled a ball in anger like that. But every fast bowler tells me bowling bumpers takes a lot more out of your body. So to give Stokes that role, in the first test, he was so stiff after bowling that role, he could hardly bat. He couldn't move at the crease. And in this test, he's gone and pulled a muscle, and he couldn't bat. He couldn't get the ball away. He couldn't cut the ball. He was grimacing. So I was surprised he's been given that role. On the back of that, I would be surprised with your valuable asset like Ben Stokes. Can he play just as a batter, grimacing at every ball? He would want to. You know what he's like, and you know what he's done in this game, 250s. He'll be desperate to. But I always go back to the game of football or whatever. Would a manager start a player who's carrying an injury? I don't think you should, as a professional sport, however much the lad wants to play, is to start someone. So if he's not fit, I would leave him out. And then it causes huge problems. Maybe Wokes comes in, pink ball test, Wokes, bit more of an all-rounder that can provide bat and ball. I noticed in one of the lunch breaks, he was out there bowling with that pink ball, so they may see him as an all-rounder. Just go back to the old days, pick your best 6 batters, keep it simple, best 6 batters, Bairstow at 7, and your best 4 bowlers for the conditions. Don't try and fudge it and weaken your batting to play the extra bowler or whatever. One final push with best 6 batters and your best 4 bowlers.
How do you see it, Al?
Well, I mean, there's a long time to go to the game, isn't it? The game starts on the 14th. That's 5 days' time. It's really tricky to say how you're going to balance the side without knowing who's going to be fit 5 days. It was noticeable with Ben, for example, today that although he was clutching his side from time to time, it was much less so than he was in the first innings. So, will that improvement click in over the next 5 days and allow him to play as a specialist batsman? I think that's impossible to answer right now, frankly. And Bairstow, you don't know there's no break or fracture to his thumb. So you don't know what kind of situation he will be in, whether he's a candidate for the gloves or not. So without dismissing that question from you, Wardy, I think it's a very difficult one to answer 5 days away when so much can change between now and then.
That's a valid point. And we don't know how the bowlers are going to pull up Keysy. But if you do go, say, down Nasser's route, your best top six, Bairstow keeps, you're looking for those seamers, who would you go for, do you think? Is it Wokes coming in, horses for courses, Robinson? Can you go back-to-back? Anderson's played, 3 tests back-to-back now, whatever it is?
Yeah. Look, I'd put Broad in there. I'd put Mark Wood in there. We're assuming that they're fit. And then it would really depend on how Jimmy's pulled up 3 test matches. As you say, sometimes they're better off for the run out, and it's not easy for Wokes just to come in who hasn't played for a little while. But I've actually played a game at Hobart. We played a tour match there on the trip I went on. And I mean, it might not be the same now, but I remember that being very tough for batting. It wasn't easy at all. The ball seamed, it sort of spat off a length.
Got to be a good player to get runs in Hobart.
Even when I was on 160, it was still doing it. You ruined my life.
Wasn't that where
it was?
Hobart? Yeah,
it was. Atherton in charge, Stewart and Hussain having a rest, and Atherton decided to
having a rest. They were down the wine bar every day,
resting, rotating, rest and rotation back there. Put Atherton in charge. He set Australia a 350 to win. They knocked him off 2 down. And the bowlers were throwing things at him at lunchtime. So when we played there, it was incredibly flat.
Yeah, and I
just like in Hobart. Final one to you though, Nasser. Joe Root was talking about putting the pride back into the badge. Did England do a bit of that by battling out for a draw in the manner they did?
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said earlier, in the context of what's gone on, 3-0 down, COVID situation, COVID bubbles, I don't think any of us disagree with some of what Ashley Giles said before this game. We have not taken for granted what our England cricket team have been through in 2021 as far as COVID, keeping the show going in test match cricket. They've been quite brilliant in withstanding those bubbles, everything that they've done. 3-0 down, injuries, coaches not there, to put up a fight and show some character is all you can ask for them. Australia are a better side in these conditions, but all you can ask is go in and show some fight and some pride in playing for England. And I think to a man, they all did that.
Ath, have you finished that lager you've been surreptitiously sort of sipping out off screen?
It's quite late here, and I just thought I'd crack open one little quiet bottle. I know it's morning time with where you are, but it's kind of 9:30 here and that time of night.
Well, enjoy a second one and a good... Yes, absolutely. High drama then it was at the SCG. England avoided a series whitewash. We look ahead now to Hobart. Thanks for watching or listening.